as a parent, watching your teen or young adult is typically where we see it the most, but it could be younger as well, struggle with unexplained dizziness, fatigue, rapid heartbeat, frequent fainting, nauseousness, anxiety, headaches is another big one. It can be really tough, right? And not knowing what the heck is going on. Every time they stand up or start to shift positions, you're wondering if they're going to faint or they're going to need to sit back down, or you're just constantly on edge, right? Now, there's been a new diagnosis that's been coming into the office more and more recently with these types of symptoms, and that is POTS, P-O-T-S, and that is an acronym for Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia Syndrome. Now, if you have been on a journey, the journey that most families that have gotten a POTS diagnosis or have some of these unexplained symptoms, or a kiddo that's struggling with them have been on, the reality is that, and I really only know this from talking to parents, from talking to kids who have come into the office with this diagnosis. But anyways, the reality is that you've probably likely seen quite a few doctors. You probably haven't got a ton of great answers. And you've probably almost for sure been told that POTS may actually run in the family and that genetics are to blame, even though mom and dad maybe didn't necessarily have some of these symptoms, or that they simply just don't exactly know and aren't able to pinpoint exactly what's causing it. But the truth is, the main cause or the main trigger of POTS is nervous system dysfunction and dysregulation, specifically within the autonomic nervous system and the nerve that helps control and regulate blood flow, blood pressure, and overall balance in the body, and an incredibly important nerve, one that we talk about all the time in the office, the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve dysfunction and something called subluxation is often to blame for this neurological condition, POTS, that is now affecting 1 in 100 teens and is far more likely in females than males. So I'm going to break it down a little bit more for you, get into the role of nervous system dysfunction, nervous system dysregulation. Another diagnosis that we're seeing a lot that tends to kind of tie very closely with POTS is dysautonomia. We're going to talk about that and how it triggers these POTS episodes with oftentimes that rapid heart rate, that fainting, and we're going to explain a little bit more about why maybe when you're seeing all these other traditional medical doctors and doing their exams, why they're not quite able to figure things out, why the answers might be escaping them a little bit, and make sure that you have a better understanding of what exactly is going on and how can we help your kiddo, how can we help you get to the true root cause of these challenges. And so understanding the real culprit, we start with, quite frankly, an overstressed and dysregulated nervous system. And when I say that we are, especially for kids, especially for females oftentimes, right, this is where we see this the most, those teenage years, we're living in the most highly stressful and highly toxic times ever, in my opinion, especially in those years, right? Social media, friends, and all that's going on with that, school, family, hormones, right? And it all adds up to being really stressful consistently on their body. And so all of this constant stress bombards these children's nervous systems and leaves it constantly stuck in a state of sympathetic dominance or fight or flight stress mode. Now, fight or flight stress mode is a part of our body, and it's totally okay if it's situational or it's momentary because there's a stressful situation. But it's absolutely not okay, and when we really start having issues is when this becomes their normal state of being. And unfortunately, this is exactly what we're seeing for so many kids, for so many families that are coming into the office. We have some tests that test for this, which we're going to talk about at the end here and how we can help. We're seeing that their normal state of being is a stress state. And so as you can imagine, right, in response to all of this constant chronic stress, the vagus nerve's job is to combat against that, right? And so it is working really, really hard. It's in charge of trying to regulate and respond to this constant demand of needing to calm, needing to relax, needing to regulate the body or down-regulate the body, right? It's in charge of sleep. It's in charge of digestion. But eventually, when it's having to work so hard because the body is just in this constant state of stress, right? And the nervous system knows it doesn't feel good to be in that constant state of stress, but your body starts to get used to it. And the vagus nerve is having to work overtime. And eventually it just gets so dang worn out and suppressed that kind of just shuts down, right? It can really only do so much. And so specifically for these kiddos, what we also see oftentimes is they're holding a lot of that stress up in this upper neck, shoulder region, right? And that's why headaches oftentimes, neck pain can be part of these POTS kind of symptoms, if you will. And that is really common because that's right where the vagus nerve is housed. And so when that stress is stuck there, we call it subluxation, right? Subluxation is a chiropractic term for just saying there's a bunch of stress that is stuck in the nervous system and can't get it out. And so when it gets stuck there, again, like I mentioned earlier, momentary stress, we put stress on our body all the time. Totally okay. Our body's designed to be resilient and adaptable to that. But when it becomes consistent, chronic, stuck stress, that's when we really have issues. And that is going to interfere and suppress with the vagus nerve, right? So now we're to this point where hopefully you're kind of starting to put the things together of it all comes down to a chronic state of subluxation or a chronic state of stuck stress and nervous system dysregulation and dysfunction. And that is going to lead to that other condition or other diagnosis I talked about at the very beginning called dysautonomia. And dysautonomia is simply when the autonomic nervous system becomes imbalanced, right? Dysautonomia. Autonomia, the autonomic nervous system, dys meaning incorrect or imbalanced, right? And so in this state, that's exactly what we're talking about, right? We've got these two different parts of our nervous system, the sympathetic or the fight or flight stress response, and the parasympathetic or the vagus nerve calming, relaxation, regulation. And all of a sudden, dysautonomia just means we don't have a balance anymore, right? All of a sudden, our stress state is more constant and our calming state is downregulated. So now all of a sudden, we've got this big imbalance in our body, or your kiddo's got this big imbalance in their body. And so all of a sudden, it's really hard for them to regulate, right? It's really hard for them to go through life in a constant state of stress. And over time, it just wears down. And so now all of a sudden, they have struggles with all of these kind of, we know that they are certainly correlated and connected symptoms, but oftentimes they kind of seem not as connected. But when you put it all together, that the true root cause is the nervous system and the body just being out of whack, it starts to make sense, like why they could have, okay, yes, headaches, and also lots of dizziness, and also nauseousness, and maybe some constipation or some digestion issues, or that fainting oftentimes is a big one. The heart rate, right, speeding up or being a little bit higher, that tachycardia, which is part of the name, right? And so all of these things are connected, but you may not necessarily know that if you didn't know that the nervous system was a huge part of this. And so then how do we figure out, right? How do we know if this is the case for your kiddo, right? And the way is we got to get their nervous system scans done. We got to get them tested. And we do that for every kid that comes into our office, not just for POTS. This is the biggest part of our exam when any kid comes into the office, is we have these amazing state-of-the-art non-invasive nervous system tests called the insight scans. And literally what they do is they give us insight into the nervous system, right? And so we're able to identify very specific areas of neurological interference where those subluxations or stuck stresses that may be contributing to your child's symptoms. So our scans are literally measuring and finding that dysregulation, that dysautonomia, everything I've been talking about in this video. We have the scans and the testing to be able to identify if that is indeed what's going on. So if this rings a bell, if you've been struggling with this POTS diagnosis, if you've been going doctor to doctor, if you've been, now you're in a constant state of stress because of you're worrying about your daughter or your son, oftentimes daughter, but could be son as well, struggling with these things, understandable, right? Super stressful when your kiddo's having some of these issues and you don't really know what to do next. And you've probably been going one place, trying this. Maybe it's worked a little bit, but not really completely. They're still really struggling. Send us a message. We'd love to help. We'll get you our scans. That way we can identify if we can help, right? If we do our scans and nothing big comes up, awesome. Then we're not the place for you. Not awesome, but we're not the place for you. Then we know, right? Then we can check that box, right? In terms of, it's actually not a nervous system struggle for your kiddo, even though we see that all the time. And I highly would put a bet that it is. But if it's not, we'll be able to tell that too. So we're going to give you those answers, give you a better understanding of what's actually going on with your kiddo's symptoms, with your kiddo's body, and give you those hope, answers, and help that we do for so many families and so many kids in the office. So reach out. We'd love to help.